What is the best gear for a Fury Warrior in Icecrown Citadel, Tier 10? Well, in 2010, we would have used Landsoul's sheet. We would have come up with a gear set that looked something like this. And if you played in a private server, you probably did the same. But these days, we're using WoW sims. And we can sim different scenarios. We can get a wider view of the situation. In the old days, Death's Choice was considered the best trinket. Right now, I'd say Whispering Fang Skull is considered slightly better. And if you look at the sims across, week 1 gearing, best in slot, multi-target, single target, all the different sort of item setups, generally, Whispering Fang Skull is better than Death's Choice. The caveat might be that Deathbringer's Will, it can proc 3 different things. Crit, haste, or strength. And it's got a long proc uptime, 30 seconds. So that 30 seconds, but you got your Death Wish up, and you whichever proc that comes off the Deathbringer as well. If it's crit, the crit on Whispering Fang Skull is devalued by quite a lot. So Death Choice becomes the stronger option in that scenario. The rest of the set that I've got here is you'll find it in all the guides going back to 2010. And this is the standard best in slot setup. It's the best in slot for example, Trolls, Tauren. For Orcs, however, there's a different setup, and I'll explain why. Shadowmourne, Axe Racial, combined with Glornzelg, which has a massive amount of expertise, results in too much expertise, and it gets wasted. So what you tend to want to do is replace the tier legs with these Northern Lights legs, which are extremely good as well, okay, to drop the expertise down. You've got room for the hit rating on these gloves, so you can fit in these gloves too, the tier gloves. So you've sort of found a nice balance to your gear set here, and you're now making more use of this expertise on the Glornzelg. So if you look at the sim numbers, we're averaging 35 DPS on single target and 25 DPS on multi-target. So it's a small difference, really. But if you're talking absolute best in slot, for an orc, you actually use the legs as the offset, not gloves. The problem then comes with Glornzelg. This is not going to be a weapon that's going to be easily available for most players. At least not for the first 2 months, I would imagine, of Icecrown. So unless you're playing in a top guild, the Crypt Maker is probably the offhand you're going to be going for. And with Crypt Maker, we're back to basically the standard setup is the best. And this is a cleave sim that's been set up here. But anyway, the standard setup works better with Crypt Maker. So even if you're an orc, really speaking, you probably want to be going for that basic standard setup, unless you're expecting to end up full best in slot. And what I would do is just aim for this setup first, and then maybe later down the line swap, so that you can get the new best in slot when you get Glornzelg, or swap to Troll, because Troll does more DPS. But okay, that's a different story. This neck, okay, the drops off Blood Queen. In this specific setup, it does sim slightly higher. I think something like 15 DPS higher on single targets. So it's not much. But this is an easier neck to get, because the boss is easier to kill, and there'll probably be less competition on this item. So you could use this, but if you get Glornzelg, which has got all that expertise on it, you're going to have to replace this neck, because it's going to be unusable at that point. Rings. Frostblood is just... we just need to use this item. If you've not got access to this one, the obvious choice is Saurfang's Cold Forge Band. It fits in nicely. You could use Might of Blight, but that's worse. You could use Heroic Might of Blight. Drops off Festegut. I mean, Festegut's not much easier than Dreamwalker. Depends how good your healers are. Festegut Ring, I have no idea what the, how in demand that is by other classes, but it's not as good. You're talking 20 to 30 DPS behind that full BIS, and further behind the lower your gear goes, because the crit on this Frostbrewed Sapphire ring is more valuable early in ICC than it is late, because you've got so much crit towards the end. But even then, when you've got all this crit, Frostbrewed is still 20 to 30 DPS ahead. So this is just a much better option, really. This one's very strong, but it's Seed of Many Mouths, okay? But it's very difficult, again, to find the place for the expertise sometimes. So if you were running that in this setup, you'd have to have a different neck. So which neck would you run? I don't know. You'd run this one, Rhymetooth Pendant. Not ideal, really. What you really want to be going for is this Frostbrewed. So I would put this pretty high on your priority list. Bracers. You can run a setup with these bracers, or you can run a setup with the Polar Bear bracers. Polar Bear bracers do not work with Cryptmaker. That's an issue. This is why I recommend you go for these. But in full BIS with Gloranzerg, this does work. The problem is, if you're an orc and you're going for the Gloranzerg full BIS, if you use the Polar Bear bracers, you can't use the gloves, the tear gloves. So you'd be stuck with the the lower DPS setup. So consider that. These are the bracers you want to be going for. I would consider this. It drops from Sourfangs, an early boss. This is one of your high priority items, definitely. Okay. Troll. Nothing to say about Troll. Troll is the best race. There's the most DPS. As long as you can maximize the Berserking cooldown. And it uses the basic standard best in slot setup we talked about earlier. If you didn't have Shadowmourne, right, but you got access to Gloranzerg double, this is a fantasy that it's never going to happen. But if it did happen, again, Northern Lights legs, okay, because two of these weapons with a massive amount of expertise, you could, and then also tier 10 legs with more expertise, it's just not going to work. So you're going to have to run the other setup. But this is you're never going to have this setup situation. You're always going to have Shadowmourne if you in this sort of situation. Professions. Dual crafting. Everyone knows dual crafting is the best profession. There's nothing new here. I'm running blacksmithing. All these sims are blacksmithing because I run a blacksmith. But the only difference is like gems, and the gear is exactly the same. Point of note: some private server players like to talk about tailoring. I've heard tailoring is really good. I mean, in the Sims, it just comes out worse. Averaged 71 DPS worse. If you consider 45 DPS behind on single targets, just I can't find a application for it being better. Maybe in some very specific circumstances, having the proc up for a really short kill time could be better. But generally speaking, no. What I've done here is I've taken my character, which is like a tier 9, almost best of what's available in tier 9. Not quite, a few items off, but this is generally what a lot of players who've been raiding every week are going to be entering Ice Crown with. And I've taken this set as a sim baseline, and I've replaced the ring with the rep ring from Ice Crown. So I'm assuming you're going to go spend 27 hours farming trash. You're going to get exalted in week 1. And you can laugh, but we did this in fucking 2010 with my dad guild, and we were like elite gamers for the night. And we spent a whole night just farming trash. I can't remember how long it took, but it was a long time. And we got the exalted ring in the first week. Anyway, so imagine you've got like almost full tier 9 BIS, and you've got the rep ring. So you're walking into Ice Crown with this setup. We're going to compare with the tier 10. So if we look at the tier 10 4 set setup, we're going to go to a cleave sim because this is relevant. Okay. We're looking at 20,165 DPS, okay? Which is roughly what I got in this little setup here. But if you look at the single target DPS, it's miles off. It's over 200 DPS behind. So let's do a single target. Okay. Oh, single target. Where are we? There we go. So if we do a single target, 11.5, yeah? So it's miles off. of this setup. For fuck's sake, I done it again. Single target. Single target. Let's go. Here we are. So 11.75. So we're over 200 DPS behind with the 4 set, the 251 setup, yeah? So this is the basic setup. You buy it with the frost badges, and you have to buy this version, and then you upgrade it with the tokens. It's over 200 DPS, but on multi-target, it's over 600 DPS ahead, 661 DPS ahead. So the 2 set, in particular, is massive for multi-target. Because you got the let's just check the 2 set for science. Deep wounds, 3% chance to gain 16% attack power for 10 seconds. So basically, the more deep wounds you go running, the more chance you got this proc going off, increasing your attack power. So the 2 set is huge on multi-target. And if you look at the general sims, on single target, the tier 9 remains better until you've got the tier 264. But on multi-target, the tier 10 is always better. The problem we get to when we get to the 4 set, 264 above, and we're starting to include Ice Crown items in our sets, is that we're going to be struggling with the armor penetration cap. If you look, I'm about 2% over the cap, the soft cap. And make sure this is single target now. Not single target, yeah, okay, good. So we got what, 12.4k. So that's it's a good sim. But if we do the exact same setup, but we're gonna replace some of the gems with armor penetration. I forgot to swap these ones out. So we got 83.6%, okay, in this setup. So all armor penetration. But we got the hit rating exactly, the expertise almost exactly, just over. And then we sim fucking leave. Okay, let's go back to single target. And there we are. 12.55. So what happens is basically there's a crossover point where Runestone just needs to be replaced because it's going to be more difficult and more difficult to stay at that 46% armor penetration. Every time you get an item, it's going to have armor penetration. You're going to be thinking about how am I going to keep my armor penetration low. Well, that's the point. You just need to abandon Runestone. And you need to get Death's Choice or Comet's Trail or anything you can. Like in the setup, I've got Death's Choice and Comet's Trail. And you need to just full armor pen gem. Because once you start gemming armor pen, you need to go full armor pen. You need to replace all your gems with armor pen. You need to get it high as you can. Because every additional gem increases in value. So the DPS gains really start to pump up when you get that armor penetration value up higher, especially towards 100%. So that'll be the goal then, to try and get up to 100%. And then as the gear gets better and better, and you start replacing more gear, you will hit 100%, and then you start filtering some of the armor penetration into strength. So you're then bumping up your attack power again. But the early goal is going to be to just get as much armor pen as possible, and sometimes that might mean using weaker items with more armor pen, just to keep the armor pen up there. But what happens then is you get more upgrades, and then you'll replace those weak items. You'll have a bit more freedom to replace the weaker armor pen items with something that might have less armor pen or no armor pen, but it's got good other stats like crit, haste, expertise, hit, whatever you need in your setup at the time, and then use the higher item level. So yeah, once you've made this switch, armor penetration becomes extremely important in every slot. So for example, this ring is really not very good, and I'm going to test if it's worse than Brand Signet, and we'll see what happens. It's not. I've scammed everyone. But yeah, in some scenarios, you will find that generally some of the weaker armor pen items could be better. And if for example, I was to use Frigid Strength as an example, so I go down to Pendulum a bit, so these are equal items, right? Then I've got to find hit rating. Well, I've screwed it now, because I'm going to lose all this armor pen. So let's say I go to find some hit rating. Use hit rating food. We'll change this gem. Put it rigid. Right, so we now hit capped. We've lost a lot of DPS. A huge amount of DPS. And we're using the same item level of neck. In fact, during tier 9 and tier 8, this was actually the best neck. Marginally the best neck. But now in this setup, it is actually better to be running rigid strength. Like over 100 DPS better. That's just the armor penetration. It's because every time we lose armor penetration because we have to gem hit, for example, our DPS just plummets. So that'll be the goal of gearing in early Ice Crown. Is you're gonna get your 4 set, but you need to get your 2 set for the multi-targets. You wanna get your 4 set. As soon as you start struggling to keep the armor penetration below 46%, just abandon Runestone and try and get one of these trinkets. Or both, well, 2 of the trinkets. And then go full armor penetration. At that point, you want to be trying your best to cover the hit rating with your items so you don't have to gem as much. And get your armor penetration up as much as you can. Once you've got your armor penetration up to 100%, then you can start balancing your gear out and trying to pump the item level. And in the end, you're obviously going to end up with something that looks like this, which is the best in slot gear setup. And then, you know, pump. So, yeah. Enjoy Ice Crown. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm getting the second Shadow Moon, so, you know, it's not going to be pumping for me for a while. But, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And, yeah, I'll put the link to the Sims in the description. You can check it out. Oh, I wanted to point out as well, I also made this little setup. And I did all this, the trinkets. So this is early Ice Crown. This whole page is just early Ice Crown gearing. So it's basically taking the baseline setup, the one I've been talking about. This essentially this, but with the ring and the 4 set, 264. So like early Ice Crown, but you got the 4 set to see how every item sort of interacts, how you know, how much DPS is gained. So for example, Dual Blade Butcher is my baseline item, and then if we look at Gloranzelg in the offhand, it's like just about 700 DPS average. If you combine single target and cleave, 443 DPS on single target. But that number will inflate massively. So this is early ICC. Like this number will inflate massively as you know, replace the other items. And the same thing with Shadow Moon above. So if we look above Dual Blade Butcher, it's 1600 DPS or 3000 DPS on cleave. But this, yeah, you can see just the sort of differences in DPS between the early ICC, and this is specifically around an orc. So some of these will kind of look scuffed, like for example, Cinderghoster's neck. Because of my specific gear set, it has actually come out worse than the Blood Queen neck. But it, you know, for a quick overview of which items you want to be looking for and how much of a sort of DPS increase you're going to get from them, you can definitely see that here. So if you look at the Band of Callous Aggression versus Frostbrood Sapphire Ring. So if I just swap those rings out for each other right now in my tier 9 gear, we're looking at about 200 DPS increase. And this is running, of course, full armor pen, because if I was going to make this setup without full armor pen, it would be screwed up with all the, because we'd be over the cap with a lot of these item swaps. But I did do, for the sake of example, trinkets, runestone. So with the runestone, I did actually get it down to the soft cap to see where we can end up, and we can look with runestone when all things are balanced out. It works out worse than these trinkets. Death Choice and Comet's Trail, it just works a better setup once we're at this point. So yeah, have fun in ICC, guys. Hope that this has been helpful.